an interview, or first it was a pre-interview. You know, a lot of companies like to do phone interviews to see how people react first, see what they know about the position. Um, and then I was brought on in June of 2019. Yeah, so I'd only really been at the company for about 8 months by the time the pandemic happened this past year. So it was definitely a change of situation because you get used to doing your job one certain way with a certain amount of resources in the office. And for me in particular, being that I was still under a year, my biggest resource was the person that sat next to me on my team. And so leaning over and being like, hey, can you help me with this was really instrumental. And then suddenly, you know, going home and having to make that transition, I suddenly was like, okay, how do I get all of my work done in a timely manner without as much help from my team members around me? So I guess to give you an idea of what my day looks like is it's pretty standard for coordinator type office managerial work. I do a lot of emails. I reach out to our vendors. I do a lot of invoicing, so making sure that vendors are getting paid on time, making sure that we are giving them the proper resources so they can get paid from us. Ensuring that the elements that we're working on, specifically the film titles or television titles, depending on it, that everything is going well with them. The primary aspect of my job as a what's called Global Archiving Master, mastering, which has changed a little bit, is my job is to oversee a film between post-production and distribution. So Lionsgate makes a lot of films, but they also acquire a lot of small budget films. So specifically for me, the legal team will go and reach out to a film company that's producing a film and be like, hey, we want to distribute it, which for them can mean they want to sell it to Amazon, they want to put it on Netflix, they want to put it somewhere, or even on our own platform, which is Stars, which is part of our company, but kind of like a sister or a brother, adjacent. But once they reach out, the legal team comes to me and my team and they say, hey, we've got this new film coming in. Can you ensure that the elements that we just, paid for and made a deal with are all ready to go? So sometimes that timeline could be a month that they made that acquisition deal and we've got to turn it around really quickly. Sometimes it could be like a year. Like right now, I've got a film that one of the legal team members reached out to me and they're like, hey, has this film come in yet? And when I reached out to my contact, they're like, this film isn't coming in until 2023. So it's like you have a lot of wait time to go through. But primarily for me, I reach out to the contact. I say, okay, when's the film coming in? When can I expect the video elements? When can I expect the audio? I'm in charge of creating the closed captioning files and any like additional audio work that might need to be done for those with special needs. And a lot of what I do is just kind of like managing things back and forth. I take the film from the post-production team and then I take it over to a vendor who's then going to what we call QC it, which is quality control. So they're going to watch the film frame by frame and make sure that everything is perfectly in sync. Sometimes it has little like freeze frames that happen in a film. Sometimes you get dead pixels. The amount of problems that can show up on a film range far and wide, and a lot of it sometimes can't be fixed. There are things that I could, recognize and be like, hey, that's a big issue for us. We can't accept this. And then I go back to post-production and I'm like, hey, can you fix this? Can you give me either, what we call a patch fix? So they just literally give us a little insert to go on top of it. Or they'll, recut, or maybe not recut the film, but they will fix it internally and then send me a new drive with the film on it with those edits made to it because they've now gone into their system and done all of the fixes necessary for it. So that's kind of what my day is. It's just a lot of coordinating back and forth, talking with different teams, different people, making sure that everybody has what they need in order to make sure that the acquisition of this film delivery goes smoothly. And my job is done once I finish it off and give it to the marketing team in distribution. And then they say, great, thanks. We're going to go sell this and marketing and sales, sorry. And they're going to sell it to Amazon. They're going to sell it to Netflix. They're going to sell it to Sony. They're going to go and do their job. And then I move on to another film. And a lot of times these films go overlap with each other. So it just depends what's going on.
Right. Okay, that's so fascinating to hear. And you see, I thought you would be such a great guest for this event because for me, even working in the Career Center, your job is something that I'm not too familiar with, right? So it sounds like you do a lot of managerial work, but then you also must have a lot of insight about the production processes. So, what are some skills or qualities or even experiences that you would deem most valuable to your field or your job?
Definitely having good, I would say multitasking, but more of it is just being able to prioritize things throughout the day. I remember when I was in DePaul, the biggest thing is you'd have, finals, like three of them on one day, and you kind of had to learn how to prioritize which one am I going to study for first, which one am I struggling in the most. For me, I would always tackle the one I'm going to struggle in the most first, even if it's my last final, and then I'd worry about the two finals where I was a little bit more comfortable. But for other people, they may go off of studying based on which final they're going to take first and how they're able to retain that information. So just being able to prioritize, because the same thing I said about how one day you get a film and it's like, great, we need this film in a year from now. And then the next day they're like, we need a film done in a week. And you're like, okay, so I'm going to work on this because I've got time with that other one. But you can't forget about that other one, because you'll be surprised how fast a year turns around and you're like, oh, this film isn't done yet? Okay, I should fix that.
Mhm. Okay, and also you seem to talk about like a lot of technical software and hardware that you use for your job. So are these skills that you had prior into coming into your job, or did you learn these on the job? Did they teach you? And then,
So,
oh,
oh, go ahead. One more part.
you can go ahead.
Okay, I was just going to say that I knew nothing when I came into this job. So don't be afraid if you think my job sounds interesting and it's something that you would be engaged into doing later on. You don't need to know everything. It's helpful if you can do some research, like I did right before my phone interviews. But I was very honest in my interview with my current bosses, and I said, hey, I have XYZ skills from these jobs, and I think they're applicable to your job, but I'm not sure if that's correct. Can you tell me how you think they'll work and what I'm lacking? And they were like, well, you're lacking this, you're lacking that, but you know what? We think you've got great charisma, great spunk, and you're the type of person that we want to work with on our team, that we're willing to teach.
Mhm.
And that was really important to them. So I came in and I didn't know much about it, but I've learned everything about it since then. Just coming in with a good attitude every single day, and trying your best within the work.
Great. And I think that's really important to hear because in a lot of my one-on-one academic advising or career advising, I always talk with a lot of students who are a bit discouraged about applying to jobs that may seem a bit out of reach because they don't have these technical skills. And I just always try to remind them and encourage them that if you can get across the fact that you're teachable and you can adapt to different situations and you know, you can easily be taught something, that's a big plus right there. So it shouldn't stop you from applying to a job. So I think that's really important to hear.
Definitely. Don't let your disbeliefs about yourself keep you from applying or trying out for something new. Because at the end of the day, you don't know what you don't have until you know. Like, you don't know the things that you don't know until you know. It's such a weird little concept. So you have to just go for it and try out. And also letting people know what your skills are, what you think are values, I think is super important. I always say when people ask me, how did you get this job? What types of things did you do? I was like, I was honest. I let people know what I could do, what I couldn't do. And they said, great, we like the things that you say you can do. So let's see those in action, and we'll teach you the rest that you don't.
Mhm. And what would you say are some of the things that you told them you could do?
Oh,
Those
I'm a
skills.
really big organizer. I love Excel spreadsheets. So I actually told them about this Excel spreadsheet I did in college for my internship. I worked for this music manager. He actually was a DePaul adjunct professor, and we ended up really, getting along in class. And he was like, "Hey, would you ever want to come intern for me?" And when I worked with him, he was managing a who was he managing? Oh my goodness. It wasn't Carrie. It was, I'm going to look up his name in a second. I can't remember, but he was managing this person that essentially had like 10 years of work in musical, like songs he had written, demos. He had unproduced lyrics. He had music. He had so many files. And he was like, can you go through this and organize it and then put it into a chart for me? I've kind of already started something like this, but like, I need to know what's there, what isn't there, and what we need to figure out, and what is missing and should be there. And I was like, great. And I took this little Excel sheet and I went wild. I kid you not, I went for it. And it was color coded. I had columns on columns. There was hundreds and hundreds of stuff. So there was a lot of moving pieces going on. But in my interview, I told them about this Excel spreadsheet that to this day is still one of my favorite things that I've ever created. And they could see the passion in that. And my current boss was like, I love Excel spreadsheets too. And that was kind of like a bouncing off moment. Tell them about the things that you think you're good at and the things that you like to do. And you never know, they'll see the passion in your eyes, which it's such a dorky thing to talk about, but it worked out in this case because part of my workload that I probably haven't mentioned is a lot of organizing assets. You have to know where everything is. I've got assets at 4 different places right now, and they all have similar names, but I need to know the difference and I need to know exactly what's there.
And when you say assets, are you speaking about like audio or video footage?
Yeah, sorry. So we switch between assets and elements sometimes. A film, so if we're working with just like a video master, and it's on what is called an LTO, which is basically like a smaller version of like a VHS tape. We used to work with what was called an HD Cam SR, which is like a bigger version of a VHS, but nonetheless, if I have elements on the asset is the physical thing. So that's the part that I'm like, oh, can you check out this element on the asset? Because that is the physical drive that I can move around from vendor to vendor.
Okay, gotcha.
Sorry if that was very confusing.
Oh, no, you're fine. You have a very technical job.
It's very specific and it sounds like a lot as I'm explaining it, but it's very simple, honestly. It's once you know what each word means, it's very easy to keep up with, I think.
Okay. So also you brought up your DePaul experience. So I want to take us a few steps back and go back to that. So what would you say was maybe some of your most valuable experience or learning lessons that you had during your time at DePaul?
So the biggest thing that I always talk about is my journey with the LA quarter that DePaul offered, which is essentially just an experiential education, like study abroad. And had I not applied for that trip and gone on it, I would not have ever gotten my internship at CONAN, which basically kind of like skyrocketed my career path because of the people that I met there and what I kind of realized about myself in that time period. But if you have the opportunity and you have the means, I definitely recommend trying out experiential education, things like that, because you'll meet certain people on trips and stuff like that, and you just kind of understand a little bit more. Maybe at DePaul is such a big school, and you can feel really alone in it sometimes. And I imagine now with the pandemic, it's got to be a whole different ball game. But going on that trip, I was able to meet people that kind of helped me figure out, oh, well, you like these 2 things. Why don't you try to do this? And I was like, that's a thing? I never knew that was something, being able to talk with people with similar experiences. And for me specifically, I was in communication. So my degree was communication and media, minors in music business and film studies. So film studies, you kind of were with some of the CDM kids who are a little bit more gung-ho about all things film, and communications wise, you're kind of often this own technical land. So going on this trip really helped me get into the film part of the world where I hadn't really met a lot of students like that. And I think that was really instrumental to me being able to say, okay, yeah, I do want to get a job in entertainment. This is a good place for me. I get it here.
Right. And I think that's really important what you just said, because working in the Career Center, I'll meet with a lot of students who say, for instance, they're majoring in communications and media. So they think that they have to stay within the communications industry. And just because they're interested in film and television, they can't really go for it because they don't have all the necessary skills. But there's so many transferable skills and themes that really cross over. So I think it's important to, never limit yourself to a certain industry.
Definitely, definitely. And also for communication and media, it's so hard because basically there's transferable skills that go everywhere. But when you think about it, it basically makes you a master of none sometimes. So you really have to figure out, what do I like about this? Whether you like, communication specific studies, like I really liked the evolution classes that I ended up taking, and some of the other like specific like movement for voice classes and stuff like that I took. But at the end of the day, I was like, what are the things that I love to do in my free time that are going to make me happy in the long term in my life? And with communication, I think you are able to say, take your degree in communication and media and say, okay, I'm going to go get a job like at an entertainment studio in their communication department or in their marketing team, and maybe it's not necessarily something that you love to do, but it'll give you good background skills and job working time that you can take that experience and transfer those skills into it. Because I think the hardest thing, especially coming out of college, is the fact that you got to get that like first 2-year job on your resume. That's really what it's all about, finding somewhere that you can be like, okay, I'm going to stay, I'm going to sit for 2 years, I'm going to learn, I'm going to absorb, and
That's
then maybe
always true.
see if other positions open up here or open up in other companies.
Mhm, mhm. Okay. And also, you were speaking about your internship at Conan. Could you tell us a little bit more, maybe about the process of how you got that internship, and then also what were some of your responsibility and tasks while you were working there?
Yeah. Um, so my internship at Conan was really interesting. Basically, when I got the position, I didn't know anyone there. It was definitely one of those instances where I was like, okay, I'm going to LA for this, experiential experience, and let's see what's going to happen. Everybody's supposed to have an internship during the day, and then you go to classes at night.
Mhm.
So I researched a bunch of places and I found Conan, and it was really sketchy almost because the page for the website was like super outdated. Like it hadn't been updated since like 2013. And like here I am applying in like 2017. And I'm like, ooh, like that's a little too far off, maybe. Maybe
Mhm.
they're not even gonna check this. This email might be dead. But it gave like a background of experiences and said, here's the type of people we're looking for. If this is you, apply. And I was like, that's me. So I'm gonna apply anyway, and we'll see what happens. But another aspect of that I just want to mention really quick is the fact that I had two choices when I applied to this internship. I could either apply for the position that had 20 slots open, which was kind of like a general PA,
Mhm.
that did a lot of different work for different aspects of the show, but you didn't get to know what those were until you got there. Or you could apply to a more specific position, and for me that was in the music department. And the music department only had two slots open. It said one or two, and I was like, oh wow, okay, so that really like decreases my odds.
Mhm.
My first instinct was to apply for the job that had 20 positions because it makes the odds better in your favor. But I ended up realizing that the music position was probably more my speed because I had already had an internship working for a music manager. So I kind of was in that field. That was where my passion really was. And I was like, you know what, I'm going to go for it. And if this page is outdated and no one ever gets back to me, so be it, whatever. And I applied, and I heard back from them right away. And I applied on a Sunday and I heard back from them by that Friday. And I applied maybe a few days before their like fall deadline. So I was very shocked thinking that they were going to forget about me. But knowing what I know now, the person who's in charge of the program, they're very last minute type of person. They wait for everything to come in and then they hire. But that's just an instance I want to let people know about. Like, if you feel like things are up against you, just go for it. Don't be afraid, because what I know now is they actually hire for those specialized positions first, and then they hire all the other people that they liked, but they just couldn't fit them into
Okay.
like the writing or music or talent positions. So that was wonderful. But as far as how my actual internship went during the day, once I got there, my job was primarily to manage the green room. So that meant I was setting up like the actual green room, but then also setting up dressing rooms, making sure that actors had coffee and tea and whatever else they needed once they got there. I also managed the band room. So specifically, I was supposed to be there on band days, like early in the morning. Sometimes that was like a 6 a.m. call. Sometimes it was an 8 a.m. call. But making sure that the band loaded in, they knew where to park. They had all their like walk-on passes, because where Conan shot at the time was on the Warner Brothers lot. So sometimes I would get there first in the morning, and then I'd get a call and they'd be like, hey, the band's stuck at the gate. Like, their drive-on passes in here. And I'm like, okay, hold on really quick. And I have to like go run up to my boss and be like, hey, can I get a drive-on? Can I get this? And I call someone and I do that. And just running around making sure that their day-to-day needs were handled, because basically bands would show up for me at like 8 o'clock. They'd do their morning load in, they'd set up all their gear, they'd run through their performance a little bit, and then they'd be done until the show started shooting at like 4 o'clock. So there's a lot of downtime for them that I was basically in charge of, like, okay, babysit the kids and make sure that they're all right, you know? So I kind of sat there most days, but I also met some really awesome bands that, you know, were like, hey, come hang out with us. Like, we're going to go walk around the lot. Do you want to show us around? Do you want to do this? Let's go get lunch. You know, I'm still friends with some of the bands that I've met to this day, just because they were good people and they were like, we like you. You're cool. Like, you know, all the places to go and whatnot. And just being personable. And most importantly, why I think they hired me in that position was that I was like, oh, you know, you can't treat, you know, famous people or semi-famous people like they're famous. You've got to just like act normal. And even though I was freaking out when like Bradley Cooper showed up sometimes, I would just be like, he's just a person. He's just a man with insanely blue eyes. It's okay. He's just a man, you know?
Yeah, that would take me a lot of restraint not to fangirl.
You get better with it over time. I mean, I was there for like 9 months.
Mhm.
So by the end of it, I was just like, yeah, whatever. But sometimes you'd still freak out.
Mhm. So one thing about internships, I know a lot of people tend to have questions about, is how to kind of network while you're in that internship, and some effective ways to do it without coming off too, kind of like asking for handouts or coming on too strong. So do you have any tips or advice on how to network while you're in your internship, or ways to grow your relationships with people?
Well, definitely. So the first thing you got to do is, when I was like at my internship, was do the job that you've been hired to do. You
Mhm.
know, if you come in there first day and you're going after all the, you know, the directors and the producers or whatever job people that are above your job who you're directly working with, they're going to be like, "Oh, this person, you know, they're not really interested in doing this job. They're interested in being that person's assistant, but that person doesn't want them, you know." So you've got to do the work that they've hired you to do. And then when time is appropriate, and you'll kind of feel it, I feel like, at least it was in my experience, where I think after I hit the 2 month mark or so, they really trusted me. They knew I could handle it. Specifically, what happened with me was there was a really disgruntled agent who called in one day, who was very upset, and he yelled at me on the phone. And I don't recommend letting people talk to you like that, but I did. And they were like, wow, you handled that so well. And I was like, did I? Because I feel terrible inside. But I guess if this makes you guys see that I'm, you know, a capable person with a level head, this is good. But you know, after that moment, I was able to talk to my bosses a little bit more freely. We had a little bit more of a friendly working relationship. I could ask them, how do these things work? How would I do this if I wanted to get a job here? You know, what type of experiences do you think I'm missing out on right now? Like, what can I do more? And for them, they were like, well, you've got to get involved. You know, the if you're getting into an industry like entertainment, the best thing that you can do is to make friends. So make friends with the people that are also PAing on, you know, shows down the street on Arrow and the Gothamverse, and over at, you know, Stars, and just make friends with people, because what's going to happen is everybody that's your age, eventually they're going to all start taking steps, and they're going to become writers, they're going to become producers, they're going to become directors. It's going to take a few decades, but if you make friends with them now, you suddenly have a relationship and be like, oh, remember when we were doing this 20 years ago? And I know that's such a long shot to do, but it's one of the most vital things, because you're able to kind of bond over your experiences, but also they may know of positions and they may know of work that's opening up that they're like, oh, my old boss needs this, but I'm already working on this new job. So do you need it? Do you know of anybody that might also need it? And if you have connections, if you have a network like that, you can refer people.
Right. Yeah, and I feel like there's a lot of beauty in having genuine connections with people rather than just like those surface level connections, because sometimes it takes time to make those and build those, but usually it is worth it.
Mhm.
So you also work as a office production assistant, which I feel like a lot of the times we hear about PAs on set. So I'm kind of curious about how your experience was being a little bit behind the scenes in the office, and what professional development did that give you as well for the position you're in today?
Definitely. Definitely, yeah. It's a little bit different. I wasn't expecting it because working at Conan before, so I went from Conan to becoming an office PA. And Conan was like this weird place where it's like, oh, well, you're not a PA because we're not paying you, but you're like basically doing the work of a PA.
Mhm.
And when I went to the office PA position, I'm thinking, oh, it's going to be kind of the same thing where you're ripping and running, you're going back and forth from set, you're taking paperwork, you're getting things signed. But it's more like you're actually just standard and you're staying in the office and you just take care of what needs to be done there. So, yes, that is a lot of paperwork. That's a lot of POs. It's a lot of organizing receipts and going on some errands throughout the day. But an office PA job is really interesting because basically the production office on a television show or on a film, for instance, takes care of every other department on the set. So you've got this set decoration, you've got the directors, you've got the producers, you've got the arts or not arts, art department. Sorry, and then you have all these other like little aspects, and you're basically going to them and saying like, hey, do you have enough money in your budget to make the costumes? Do you have enough money to print this? Oh, do you guys need new paper for your printer in the art department? Great, we'll bring you over some paper. You're kind of taking care of those day-to-day needs. So you do get to see a lot, but personally for me, I wasn't too keen on that work in a long-term sense
Mhm.
because you are essentially putting everybody else's needs before your own. And
Right.
that was not something that even I could be like, oh, okay, even if I rise in the ranks in, the office production, the production office sector, you're still having to constantly think about what do all these other teams need to take care of to get this job done. And not that there's anything wrong if you are a selfless person who's like, oh yeah, I'm always thinking of this. But for me, I was like, I want to be selfish sometimes. Like, I want to take care of myself. How can I do things in this industry that aren't just taking care of other people all the time, that I'm doing something for myself or that gives me pride?
Mhm. So for a job like that, you must have to have a lot of insight into the production process behind films and television, give or take, you would say?
Yeah, sort of. I mean, you should know the difference if you're working on set with like a television series or if you're working on a film. That's one, but you don't really need to know like all the ins and outs because they'll teach you it as it goes. The first thing I learned when I worked at Snowfall, for instance, is that our job was just to take care of what is happening today. What are the fires that we can put out on
Mhm.
this day? Anything else that's happening, let's say, over on set there's an issue where somebody doesn't show up to work and they're late and that puts everything back by like 2 hours.
Mhm.
um, if they end up saying, okay, we're going to cut this scene or we're going to move this scene to another day, that becomes it's a problem for today, but it's also a problem for tomorrow because now we as the production office have to go and figure out when everybody is available to shoot for that scene on another day. And we're like, okay, well, what if they switch it with? They switched it with, instead of shooting scene one, they shot scene two. So that means whenever we are going to shoot scene two, we need to switch and shoot scene one on that day.
Mhm.
So it's kind of like managing that type of details and how you have to learn to kind of go with the flow of things, which for me was very difficult to do sometimes because you're like, okay, I know what's going to happen today. And then everything changes and you're like, okay, we're going to figure this out. And you just kind of go with it and you have to move quick and you have to be on your feet. But yeah, I guess you kind of have to know how things work on production or at least be curious enough to figure it out, to ask people what's going on.
Okay, that's a good way to put it. Because in a lot of my advising meetings, well, with COVID, it can be really hard for students now to get that on-set experience because it's just not as many opportunities. So I run into a lot of students who start feeling like they're a few steps behind in terms of having that kind of knowledge and applying for jobs like that or applying to be a PA because they may not know the ins and outs of what it's like to be on set. So would you,
Yeah,
is,
you
I'm
don't
sorry.
need to know a ton. You could literally just for one job that I got hired in Chicago after I graduated, I worked on if anybody on this call is a fan of like CW's DC universe, they've got, you know, Arrow and the Flash and Supergirl. They did a big crossover episode when they were introducing Batwoman with Ruby Rose, which she's now left the production. But when they were doing, they were trying to do like what's called a backdoor pilot episode,
Mhm,
and they were shooting that. They're like, okay, we want to do all of our exterior shots in Chicago because Chicago is Gotham City.
mhm,
So for me, when I got that position, they were like, do you know your way around Chicago? And I was like, yeah, I know my way around downtown. Like I've lived in the city for 4 years. They're like, great. That's all we really need to know. We need to know that someone can get us around because we're all LA people and we're not going to know the fastest ways or the best places to eat. And sometimes it's literally just basic knowledge like that.
mhm. And for positions like that and job opportunities like that, how did you hear about it?
I actually heard about that position through a fellow graduate who went to DePaul. Now, I never actually met him. Shout out to JB. I never met him until we went to LA. He wasn't on my LA quarter program. He had actually graduated, I think, the quarter before me, or maybe the year before. And he was out in LA, and I remember I posted on there's like a DePaul like in LA
Mm.
Facebook page, and
Oh,
he had posted saying like, "Hey, are there any new people out here who are working on the Warner Brothers lot and they're looking to meet up for coffee?" And I was like, "Hey, I'm here. Let's meet up." And we actually never got a chance to meet up. We found out that we were working on stages that were across the way from each other. Like I worked on 14 and he was on 15. We were
mm,
literally right next to each other every single day. But because of his schedule and when I had breaks for lunch, we never had a chance to actually meet up. But when I actually reached out to him because he posted something on Facebook months later, and he was like, "Hey, looking for, you know, PA friends in Chicago who are looking to work." And I reached out to him and I was like, "Hey, I know we never got a chance to meet up. Do you remember me? I saw you posted about this. Is there any way you can connect me? And do you feel comfortable doing that? Because sometimes, even if somebody's offering a job,
mm,
putting giving a recommendation for someone else and putting your name on their work ethic can be a
mm.
big ask. So definitely asking him like, do you feel comfortable with that? And he was like, yes, of course, I know you, we're cool. And that was how I got connected to that position. And the interview I had with them was very informal. They're like, well, you're JB's friend, so like we're cool, we're already hiring you.
Yeah, that's great to hear. And that kind of goes back just to building those genuine connections. But I also feel like going to a school like DePaul, you're surrounded by so many people with like-minded interests, so that it's really a great place to connect and build with people. And I do just want to say, I do want to encourage people to drop any questions you may have in the chat because I know I'm getting all of my questions answered, but you all also have the opportunity to ask Brittany anything. So please take advantage of.
Yeah, Juliana, you have a question?
Yeah, so you're I really enjoy hearing about this. I am super passionate about music and business, and I am just obviously my dream is to find a way to combine them. So hearing about this is really interesting to me. My one question, something that I struggle with like feeling prepared for is how did you find your internship at Conan, for example? What do you search? How do you find what companies are going to have the right job for you?
Got it. Yeah. So Google search is huge, but Google can give you any mess of things, and you don't want to end up in some creepy alleyway like this is an internship. Um, so honestly, I think I just kind of did some research because I knew I knew what type the God, I'm trying to remember honestly. So here's where I'm trying to get. I knew about Mindy Kaling. I really love Mindy Kaling and the Mindy Project, and I had actually written like a paper on her in the fall quarter before I went in winter. And I knew that Mindy had gone to the Conan show, and they had a reputation for having all of these great interns who went on to become writers and actors and stuff like that. So I looked up to see if they were still doing internships. Specifically, I was following in her footsteps. And that's how I found myself on the Team Coco website. And I was like down in the bottom of it, looking for careers, looking for emails, just looking for anything I could find online to see if I could get in there, because specifically in music and in entertainment, sometimes a lot of things get handed down to people that not to say people that know people, but like the whole you know, give it to my son, give it to my nephew, give it to, that type of scenario. So I was like, how can I figure out how to find these things? And I found my way to the website, and again, I had this really sketchy page, and I just kind of went for it and applied. But as far as what you can search, think about companies that you like. If you want to get into music business and you want to work at Capitol Records, go look on the Capitol Records website. If you don't think Capitol is for you, go look at Sony, go look at Universal. Just think about places that you've thought about working before, or maybe you're like, oh, they have a cool business model. Like Netflix, for instance, is always on people's brains because most of us have Netflix accounts, and we're like, yeah, I'd want to work there because I use it all the time and I get a free Netflix account. So, look up in those companies, look at places that you use every single day. And I think, kind of in hindsight, one thing that probably brought me to Lionsgate, which I'd never even thought about, was the fact that when I was in middle school, I was obsessed with the Twilight movies and the Hunger Games movies and the Divergent movies, and like all that stuff definitely played a role in the back of my mind when I was applying to these jobs, thinking like, oh wow, like I can work there. So yeah, that's what I would say. Look into places that you like already, that are already in your daily life.
Yeah, that's really great advice. I never really thought about it like that. Would you say if you're like looking through their website and you're trying to find like a link where you can apply for an internship, you're not seeing anything, should you email them or reach out to them and ask if there are opportunities for internships, or will you see it on their page if they have it?
Sometimes they'll let you know and they'll put it on their page, but a lot of times there are companies like that don't really subscribe. They don't really put it out there when they're looking for work. I found that if you can go digging deep enough on a website, they'll have like a general resume drop and an email address, and you can always like send an email there and be like, hey, I'm a college student graduating, I'm looking for internship works, here's my availability. And you can literally let them know, like, say you're in their area, if you're going to a place in LA and you're going to be there for 3 months, say I'm going to be there from June the 12th to August the 1st, like I'd love to come and work for you for college credit and all that, and just kind of lay it out there, because you never know if someone might be like, oh yeah, we were looking for someone and we looked in this pile and we found you, are you still interested? I think there was another part to your question I might have missed. No, I got it
No,
all.
just yeah, definitely. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you for asking a question too. I saw you taking notes since the beginning. It made me feel very honored.
No, this
I
is
think
great stuff. I feel like I never really get to meet with people like this who especially have gone to DePaul and know what it's like to work here. So no, this is great stuff.
wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm really honored to be here. If everybody else has questions, I'm definitely open. Like I'm an open book. I will literally tell you anything you want. I see someone ask me a question. Sorry, Dagny. I'm just
Oh,
taking
no,
over.
no, you're totally fine. I was gonna read it out to you in a second, but go ahead.
Okay. Do you want to read it then?
Oh yeah, I'll introduce it. So this question is from Kidji, and she asked, when you were first starting out, did you find yourself being the only person of color in the production room? Are there rooms you find yourself in currently starting to diversify, whether it be race, gender, class, etc.?
Yeah, great question. Unfortunately, yes, I did find myself being the only POC, specifically the only POC woman. And not always like that. Some of my first few jobs, like when I was at Conan, I think I was one of 4. Um, and that wasn't really difficult for me, but it definitely was something that I was like, you're just kind of aware of it. And at least for me, I went out of my way to like go make friends with those other women around, just to try to like, see if I could talk with them if they had any insider advice for me and their experience. Hold on, I'm reading your question. First, trying to find yourself. I did find myself doing that. I think the rooms are trying to change right now, but it's a long process. My company has been trying to hire more inclusive, hire in a more inclusive manner as of late. And, you know, I can say, for instance, on my direct team, they've finally hired a young Black man, and he's like the first Black man that I have met in my department since I've worked at the company. There's been some other POC women of various backgrounds, but I hadn't seen a lot of diversity in the men as of late. So it's definitely trying to change, but it's such a slow process, I think. And I feel like they are in such a difficult position, specifically like our HR, because they want to hire all these people and there are tons of people that are qualified candidates, but it's a matter of like, okay, well, we can't just hire all of them, because then it looks like we're just hiring them because they're talented people of color, rather than being like they are the most talented person for this position who also happens to be a person of color. That's always the balance I feel that people are trying to get. Yeah, go for it. Let's chat.
Hi, thank you for answering the question. So how have you, and you kind of mentioned this a little bit, but how have you navigated and taken care of yourself when you're the only person in the space? Because I get it, you know, network, get to know people, but some people are weird, you know what I mean? So so how do you navigate and take care of yourself yet still get shit done, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Great question. Well, I've navigated just the best way I know how, which is being my authentic self. And if people don't like me and if they don't see my value, then I don't bother with them. But I think if anything, I've tried to just find support in other things. You know, I have a really good family support system. So when I have issues that I feel are maybe more dealing with my differences than my similarities at work, I really rely on my mom and my best friends, and who are kind of like sisters to me. But as far as getting stuff done and still being a person of color, I think it's difficult sometimes, because I had a recent work kind of situation happen where it had nothing to do with the color of my skin or anything, but it makes me think about it because I was basically assigned a lot more work as of late with COVID, with layoffs, with just a lot of company changes. And I feel like anybody else in my position would have maybe left the job, would have gone to their superiors and been like, this is too much work. I can't do this. I don't want it. You know, like, you're not doing this to anybody else. But I felt like as a young Black woman, this was unfortunately my opportunity to show them what I was made of. Now, the work wasn't too tiring. I'm capable of it. That's the thing. But I feel like you have to find those moments where you can shine, and taking on all this work and being like the go-to person I became has now given me a little weight to my walk, if you understand what that phrase kind of means, where my boss's bosses know my name now, because I've done such amount of work and done it with a smile and done it without having any backlash or, you know, issues, I guess, that they're like, okay, Brittany is capable. We know that she is the type of person that we can get anything done with. And I'm really struggling for words here. I guess I'm just trying to say that as a young Black woman, you have to kind of take your opportunities where you see them to make your name. And although this work was more than I thought I was capable of, I've now done it and I know I am. So it's been for the better, I have to believe. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you. I have another question, but I'm gonna make room for other people in case someone else has something to ask. So I'll hold off.
Yeah, or if there's any other people, please jump in. Otherwise, me and Kiji will probably just go off.
Yeah, feel free to join in, whether you want to drop it in the chat or unmute yourself and say it out loud. But if no one has anything to say, Kiji, I would say go ahead and ask your question.
Sweet, thank you. I came in a little late, so I'm sorry if this is repetitive, but did you have, okay, I guess this is a two-parter. When you were first starting, did you have employers that felt like they were mentoring you, or was it just like a get it done? That's part one. And then two, did you, when you first started, did you know what you were doing? Or like, did you learn along the way? Were people patient with you in learning along the way? So that's a two-parter.
So I definitely did not know what I was doing when I started the job. I went into my interview and I was like, I had never heard of this aspect of your work before in my life, but I need a job and I'm willing to learn, most importantly. And I was lucky enough that my bosses saw that in me. They heard me out and they're like, great, we're going to hire you on the spot. I actually found out that I like interviewed on a Thursday and they were supposed to have more interviews on Monday and they didn't even bother having other interviews because they're like, we just liked you so much. We just knew you were the right person for us. But yeah, I did end up having mentors. My boss, she was phenomenal in bringing me up to speed. I mean, she did not have to do as much work as she did, but she really took the time to be like, okay, let me teach you how to, do invoices. Let me teach you how to stay organized, how we like things to be organized here. I think she was a great mentor. I think I talked about briefly with Dagny, I don't think you guys were on yet, which was when we made the switch from COVID to being at home. My biggest resource when I was in the office was the person that sat next to me. And because they, I guess, were essentially in my position before they had been promoted. So they were the person that I always went to with all my questions. And they became a huge mentor and a good friend to me because they were the person that I was constantly talking with the most and constantly being like, can you help me with this? Can I do this? Like, I think I answered this correctly. Can you write this email for me? Because I don't know what to say to this person. They're being a little aggro. Yeah, so I was lucky enough that I had a good team of mentors, a good team of people that recognize that I'd clearly been hired for the job for a reason. And now they just needed to provide the skills to me to do that job, because I recognize that not everyone is getting that type of help sometimes. Even now, we've started getting new hires into our company. And I've tried to do what I can to help those people the same way I've been helped, because it's no fun to be doing a job and you're stressed out all the time because you're like, no one, like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I don't want to do the work wrong and no one can help me. So you want to be that type of person that's like, okay, I'm going to give back from what I've received.
Received. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for those questions. Once again,
Awesome.
I'm just going to open up the floor to any other questions we may have from our guest.
I have another question. How did you kind of figure out exactly what career you were meant to end up with, or at least like what area you were meant to end up in? Like I'm interested in marketing, accounting, management right now, and I'm excited to take all those classes, but as what I've taken so far, I've liked everything, and I really want to get to a point where I can focus on something and just go for it. And I'm just wondering, what was it really difficult for you to get to that point, or did you just step back and look at what you really liked and figure it out easily?
So two parts there. I'm still figuring out what I want to do, what I am meant to do. I'm figuring that out every single day. This year has taught me that. But as far as like, what was that moment that I was like, oh my gosh, this is what I need to try to pursue in any shape or form. I was in my internship in DePaul, my first internship, working with the former teacher who worked as a manager. And I was telling him about how I was really in love with this show called Jane the Virgin, if any of you have ever heard of that. Mm-hmm. And Jane had like such beautiful music all the time, and all of that was it was composed music, not music that they chose. But I was always talking about that and how I really loved that show. And I was like, I wish I could be the type of person that, you know, picked the music for television. And the guy I was interning for was literally like, you mean a music supervisor? And I was like, that's a job. And that was the moment that I was like, okay, so there's a job for literally what I want to do. How do I get there? And that's where I figured out, okay, I'm going to go in the LA quarter. And I got an internship with Conan, and I was in the music department. I was like, okay, now I've got a music internship. Where do I go from here? I guess I need to try to be a music assistant. I need to probably work on some television shows and get some experience there. Just figuring out those little steps. Now, as far as how that led me to my current position at Lionsgate is completely different, because I didn't really know if music management, or not management, music supervision was still something I want to do when I got this job about 2 years ago. And I guess I'm still passionate about it, but I slowed down my role because I became interested in other things from what I had seen. And I was like, okay, but I need to have a job. I can't live in LA and not be working. So I was like, let me take this job, and, you know, I'll be an assistant, I'll be a coordinator, I'll learn some other valuable office skills that hopefully I can take these and transfer them into maybe a more specific position working at, you know, a universal music group or something. Because once they know that you have, you know, certain managerial skills, I guess, that those are transferable, and it makes it easier for you to get other specific positions, even if it means that, you know, if I make a change, I'm going to make a lateral change rather than an upward change, but it'll still be doable. So I guess you just have to figure out I don't know what your moment will be, but I guess you need to just figure out what are things that you really like. You mentioned a lot of stuff that you're interested in, but if I had to ask you to make a PowerPoint presentation on, like, what do you love? Like, what are you passionate about that you get on the phone with your best friend or your mom and you can sit and talk for hours about? What is that thing? And how can you do that on a job or on a scale where you're getting paid to do it, where people want to hear about that? You know, figure out what those steps are. It may not be linear, like, you know, becoming an accountant where you get a degree, take the CPA test, and then you're an accountant and get a job. But there's ways around, and there's no straight line to a career. You have to just take steps and hope eventually that you get there and you're happy, most importantly.
Yes. That's such a great piece of advice. I love that. Like, it isn't linear, it can hop all over the place, but that doesn't mean you're not progressing. So
No,
great piece
definitely
of
not.
advice.
I always try to think movement is always progress. I was a big fan of that Disney movie, The Robinsons, Keep Moving Forward. I
Mhm.
always say that, just as long as you're moving, you're doing something.
Yes. So once again, I just want to open up the floor one last time for any questions as we're approaching 6:30. So I'll give it a few seconds.
And I also want to offer up to people, you're welcome to add me on LinkedIn. Oh, sorry, Sydney. Hi, I saw you pop in.
Can you all hear me now?
Oh, it's a little bit
Can
choppy.
you hear me okay? Oh no, the noise is not, the sound is not. Oh man, I'm so sorry. Is it still a little choppy?
It's a little choppy, but I can hear you.
Okay, I'm sorry. This was great. I know it's so good. I could hear the whole thing. I'm sorry if I'm a little choppy. The Wi-Fi's been awful, but I don't have any questions. I think those are amazing. And to everyone, just to introduce myself, I'm sorry if I'm choppy again. I'm having Wi-Fi issues. But I'm the career advisor alongside with Dagny, who's the student ambassador. So I do exactly what Dagny said she does. I also do when it comes to advising and stuff. So amazing. Brittany, thank you so much again for being here. This was so.
Yes, thank you so much.
No problem. I've had such a great time. It was really awesome hearing your questions. For those of you who were brave enough, but anybody else, if you were listening and you had questions and maybe you want to offline, you can always add me on LinkedIn. I'm seriously open. I'm really honored that DePaul people even want to reach out and ask me about my experience. So just know that I'm here.
I was so happy when you responded to me on LinkedIn. But yes, thank you so much, Brittany. This was such a great event. You just said so many like meaningful things and very inspiring. So thank you everyone for joining us for this event. I once again just want to plug the Career Center that we're here to help you through your career path. Whether you need help applying for a resume or a cover letter, or you just want to talk through your career path with someone, we're always here to help. But we also love to put these events on for you all, so you can just, be exposed to some more career paths that are out there for you. But on that note, I think we're going to wrap up this event. I'm seeing a lot of thank yous in the chat. But awesome. Once again, thank you so much, Brittany. It was a pleasure meeting you. And thank you, everyone. Have a great night.
Thank you. Thanks, Brittany.
Bye. Thank you, guys.
See ya. Thank you.
Tag, should I log off too? Are we done? I didn't know if you want to talk anymore.
Oh, we can touch
I
base.
think we're all done.
Thank you so much,
Okay.
Brittany. That was great.
Okay, awesome. I just wanted to make sure. I didn't know if we were doing like a chat back anything.
No, that went really, really well. And I was happy we got those questions in at the end as well. Because I know like the chat was moving a little bit slow, but sometimes like once one person asks a question, then it just gets the ball rolling.
Awesome. Okay, well then I'll let you guys have the rest of your nights. Thank you so much for having me again. I'm sincerely honored. Very, very happy to work with you both. Let me know if you ever need anything else.
Oh, yes. Yeah, and I'll definitely reach out with you just to pick your brain one of these days too, because I would really appreciate that.
Seriously, dying to do that. Seriously,
Okay,
we'll chat for an hour. It'll be great.
Okay, we'll do. All right, thank you, Brittany. Have a good rest of your night.
Great meeting you, Sydney. Bye.
Yeah.
Bye. Thanks, Brittany, again. Dagny, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
That was so amazing.
Yeah, no, I thought it went really well.
Yes, thank you so much for like taking the lead on that. I'm so sorry my Wi-Fi was just being, I heard most of it. She's so amazing.
No, I know that was like stop recording. I know that was great. Like one, just hearing about her job